Speakers, publishers, consultants, coaches, and info marketers unite. The Speaking of Wealth Show is your roadmap to success and significance. Learn the latest tools, technologies, and tactics to get more bookings, sell more products, and attract more clients. If you're looking to increase your direct response sales, create a big-time personal brand, and become the go-to guru, the Speaking of Wealth Show is for you. Here's your host, Jason Hartman.
Welcome to the Speaking of Wealth Show. This is your host, Jason Hartman, where we discuss profit strategies for speakers, publishers, authors, consultants, coaches, info marketers, and just go over a whole bunch of exciting things that you can use to increase your business, to make your business more successful and more passive and more automated and more scalable. So we will be back with a great interview. Be sure to visit us at speakingofwealth.com. You can take advantage of our blog, subscribe to the RSS feed, and many other resources for free at speakingofwealth.com. And we will be back with a great interview for you in less than 60 seconds.
What's great about the shows you'll find on jasonhartman.com is that if you want to learn more about investing in real estate in different markets, there's a show for that. If you want to learn 17 ways rich people think and act differently, there's a show for that. If you want to know how to get paid to borrow, there's a show for that. And if you'd like to know why Amsterdam doesn't take dollars or why pools are for fools, there are even shows for that. Yep, there's a show for just about anything. Only from jasonhartman.com, or type in Jason Hartman in the iTunes store.
My pleasure to welcome Josh Shipp to the show. He is an incredible success story, starting out at age 17 and now at age 29. Published author, Inc. magazine recognized him as the 30 under 30, earning over $2 million a year in the youth speaker market. And I think today you'll really learn a lot of great things about going deep into a niche market and creating a big success out of that. Josh, welcome.
Jason, thank you so much for having me, sir.
Good. You've got an amazing story. Why don't you give the listeners a little bit of your background?
Yeah, so I was basically a kid that I grew up not knowing my parents. I grew up in the foster care system. I lived in around a dozen different foster homes by the time I was 14. Fast forward to high school, the way I sort of dealt with that rough childhood was by being a class clown. 9 out of 10 teachers were annoyed by that, understandably. But this one teacher said to me one day, she said, "Josh, you know when you make your friends laugh, you have their attention. And when you have their attention, you have a responsibility to say something of value." And so that sort of got me thinking. I ran for the student organization president, won that, became state president of that organization, and then sort of found myself in a situation where I was, through the duty of my leadership position, sort of forced to do public speaking. And, you hear of a lot of people getting into public speaking for that. They have to go and give some sort of presentation or, something exposes them to that, and either they like it a little bit or someone will come up and comment afterwards. And so that's sort of how I got started, is I had this rough childhood and then became a class clown. And then through that, someone sort of said to me, there's something here. There's something about your wanting to make people laugh and your personality and the things you've gone through. And more importantly, the things you've learned from that you could use and share with an audience.
Fantastic. And so what was really your first step then, Josh?
Well, really my first step to making this a serious career was to, as simple as it sounds, was to take it serious. Instead of just, waiting for speaking engagements to come to me, that I decided this was something that I wanted to, and that I was going to have a game plan, and that I knew that if I asked about 100 people if they would have me speak at their school or at their student organization or something, that I would get about 99 no's, but I would get one yes. And I knew that, even though those 99 can sort of hurt your ego, I knew that one yes was worth it. I think we have to be careful to do things for our business and not for our ego. And sometimes when you're starting out, it can be difficult, but ultimately in the long run, it's totally worth it.
And so were you doing those as free speaking engagements in the beginning?
Frankly, when I first started, I would go anywhere for any amount of money, simply because, number one, I needed the stage time. You can buy good marketing materials. I can pay someone a ton of money and they can build me an amazing website. But the only way you can have an amazing speech is by earning it. Getting up on stage, doing a decent job, tweaking it, next time doing a little bit better job, tweaking it, and again. I believe it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. So, I needed the stage time. I needed to be earning a little bit of money, regardless of what it was, so I could put that back into my business. And even more importantly, I needed word of mouth. I needed testimonials. I needed all that footage and all those credibility pieces that go into building the speaking career.
Why did you think, Josh, that your topic area or your speaking style resonated so well with audiences? I mean, just give me an example maybe first before you answer that question. How many engagements a year are you doing?
There was a time I was doing about 100 a year, sometimes even more. Now I have significantly jacked up my fee and am doing about 36 a year.
36 per year. And may I ask what your fee is?
Yes, at this point it's anywhere from $75,000 to $15,000, and again, that's in the youth market to schools.
That's amazing. So you're charging anywhere from $15,000 on up to $75,000.
No, I'm sorry, $7,500 to $15,000.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I know you said that in kind of reverse order, so I wasn't sure. Because Colin Powell's at like the $75,000
right
number,
exactly.
So you're not quite there yet, but you're doing quite well.
No, I'm not. Yeah, he better watch it though. I'm coming after him.
All right. And Josh, so what was it about your style or your message that resonated so well with these audiences?
I think because there were a few things that were interesting. Getting started at age 17, being young, it was interesting because I knew my audience. I knew exactly how to relate to them. I knew what would make them laugh. I knew what they were worried about. I knew what they were frustrated about, etc.
You were one of them.
Exactly. And that gave me a huge advantage. Now, the disadvantage I had was that I was really young. My age was one of my greatest assets and also a big hindrance in that some event planners who are not 17 years old, they're in their 40s and they're administrators or principals or things at schools, they needed to know that, this 17-year-old, essentially a peer, could get up on stage and captivate and deliver a solid message. And so I think a lot of times speakers get started in their own industry because exactly like you said, you are one of them. And I think that's a great place for anyone to get started.
So you would recommend that speakers listening or aspiring speakers listening really go after a market that is authentic to them, that is something that they are personally engaged in, right?
Absolutely. I think even more so, I would say non-negotiably, that's where you must start. Could you eventually go and work in other markets? Absolutely. But that's where you should start because it's going to be the easiest thing for you to naturally talk about. You're going to have experience in that. You're going to know the ins and outs of it, the quirks, the frustrations, the highs, the lows, all of that thing. So you're going to have a lot more credibility. And secondly, these first couple speaking engagements that you need to get so you can film a demo video, so you can get some recommendations going, all those assets you need to have to convince other people to hire you, you can often get that just through a relationship that you may have with someone. Someone may be holding a sales meeting and you happen to know them or have worked with them and you say, look, I'm getting things started. I'd love to come and speak at that event for you at a discounted rate or for free because I want to get this going and I'm going to film it and I'm going to have things lined up to do that with. I mean, the video is such a huge piece. Any aspiring speaker, I would say that's one of your top priorities. Outside of what do I want to speak about and who do I want to speak to, I would say your number 3 priority is getting a demo video because a speaker with no demo video is like a wedding photographer with no photo portfolio.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, it's absurd to think that you can get hired without that piece of material because, you are not the product, your speech is. That's what I'm paying for. Thus, I want to see a preview of that.
So they're gathering, just to understand logistics a little bit, you're getting hired by high schools and they are creating an assembly and you're doing a keynote. Are there other speakers typically in your format? Is it like a whole day of speakers or is it a one thing? And what's your speech called?
Sure. So there are several different venues that I speak at. I speak at high schools or middle schools or colleges, and these tend to be in assembly formats where they bring, all the students from the school into the auditorium, and I speak to them. Another thing would be student leadership organizations. First of all, there's 64,000 schools in the U.S. I think the youth market is one of the biggest kept secrets. I talk about this in the class I teach at U Speaker University, that it's this undiscovered market. There's 64,000 schools, and the wild thing is that this audience turns over every 4 years. Unlike
Good
the corporate
point.
market
Yeah.
where the same person could be there, 5 years later, and it's unlikely they're going to have you back for the same message. But I could go to the same school every 4 years, give the exact same message, and have a completely new audience. So schools is one part of it. There's also 24,000 student leadership organizations in the U.S. So this would be organizations like DECA, FBLA, FFA, Student Council. There's all these little niche student organizations that cover some aspect of student life. And, some are business focused, some are leadership focused, some are community service focused. And they tend to have a few leadership conferences each year where they bring in speakers from all over the region, they bring in students from all over the region or all over the state or from all over the country, and they'll have a few speakers at those events as well.
I was actually a DECA judge once, so I'm familiar with DECA. That's interesting. So I think a lot of people, maybe Josh, and tell me if you think this perception is correct, but it is my perception, and it's probably a lot of the speakers listening have a similar perception. They think that schools don't really have good budgets like the corporate world. The corporate world, when a large financial services firm or real estate firm or pharmaceutical firm, they have the big budgets, and the speakers want to work with companies, obviously, that have nice big budgets because then they can afford to pay your fee. Do you think that's one of the perceptions that's keeping speakers out of this market?
Absolutely. I think there's been a lot of unknown about the youth market and just a sort of a lot of assumptions made. It's in the last couple of years when we've been in, quote, these tough economic times, my demand has gone up. The speakers that I work with and coach, their demand has gone up. I raised my fee. I thought I'm turning down 10 full fee speaking engagements per week because the demand is so high in this market. And I have friends that are corporate speakers, and I'm not trying to be dramatic here. I'm not saying the corporate market is going down. I'm saying their demand has slightly gone down, whereas in the youth market, I've seen it completely and steadily increase. And the thing that's different, I think, especially for an aspiring speaker, a beginning speaker or someone that just wants to get started, is I think the youth market is, frankly, an easier place to get started because there's less competition, there's a ton of demand. Like I said, 64,000 schools, 24,000 student organizations, 4,000 colleges, 450,000 churches that all have youth as a part of their church, if that's part of your background. And the thing is that they're not looking for famous people. They're not. They're not looking for former NFL coaches. They're not looking for people that have climbed Mount Everest. If you've done those things, very well, but they're not looking for people like that. They're looking for everyday, ordinary people that have some interesting background, some wisdom that they can share from that, and that are just going to be real and stand up and deliver a good message to the students. So I think it's an enormously overlooked market, and there is more than enough demand. And I can tell you as a speaker myself, I don't want to clutch this market because, I don't want to share this market or something. I think the more the merrier because the students deserve to hear from a diverse group of speakers, all with different backgrounds and experiences.
Well, that was actually a great point that you just brought up, Josh, because I was going to say, doesn't this whole discussion beg the question, why would Josh Shipp be creating his own competitors?
Yeah, because, I probably wasn't mature enough to do that in the beginning. I thought I did have to be greedy or try to hold on to my secrets or the things I was doing. But I can tell you, it sounds wise for me to try to talk like some wise grandfather at the ripe age of 29. But having done this for 12 years now, you get to a place where you realize there's way more audiences than I can ever serve. And frankly, some audiences need to hear from you, not from me. I'm not the best fit for that audience. I don't get what they're going through or that background or the situation they're in, but they do need to hear from your message. So for me, I can essentially, as you put it, create competitors because there's way more demand than there are speakers. And, frankly, as long as you're someone that has the right intention and wants to share a good message, I wish you nothing but the enormous success.
Josh, I think it also beckons back to that old concept or adage in advertising and marketing, and that is that the best thing that ever happened to Coke is Pepsi. Because when good quality competitors come into a market, number one, it makes us all better. It raises the bar, it raises the tide, and that rising tide sort of floats all ships, because one of the great things about capitalism is that you have out of necessity is the mother of invention. Everybody just gets better at their trade, and ideas inspire ideas, and competitors, believe it or not, they do share ideas either intentionally or unintentionally, and also it expands the category for that service. So when soft drinks were first coming out, there was not as large a category in the beginning, and Coke could have never created that market. As when you let competitors in, they create a larger market and a larger awareness of the category.
I totally agree with that. I like your Coke and Pepsi analogy. I'm gonna use that from time to time. I also thought that way about Starbucks. You know, some people maybe sometimes down on Starbucks or taking out the mom and pop coffee shops. But frankly, to me, I think Starbucks, this juggernaut, has sort of introduced coffee drinking culture more so in our society. And as long as you're a solid, independent coffee shop, I think you're going to have more customers that are now drinking coffee on a daily basis. So
I think so too. So Josh, give us a little idea, if you would, for your content, your actual content. What are you telling the students in your audiences? I mean, is it about keeping the faith and overcoming the odds, overcoming adversity? Is it about entrepreneurship, or are there multiple areas which you cover?
Sure, great question. So there are three main categories that schools will hire speakers on, and it's this. It's leadership, motivation, and prevention. Now, within that, you can get as fancy and creative as you wish to. You know, so bullying, alcohol and drug, this would fall under the prevention category. Motivation, that's probably more so where my talk falls into, because it's about overcoming obstacles and growing up as a foster kid and then putting that back on the audience and how that relates to them. But those are the main three categories, because the interesting thing is, imagine yourself as a high school principal. I'm going to pull 2,000 students out of class, shove them in the auditorium. That's going to be nuts, just getting them all in there. So your message needs to be relevant to all 2,000 of my students. So you need to understand those three categories if you're interested in this market, because you have to make it worth that school's time. My message is, you're right, a lot about overcoming obstacles, but I do it in an entertaining way. In the beginning, it's funny, because I believe with teenagers you have to hook them, you have to earn the right to be heard. And so in the beginning, it's funny to grab their attention. And then I sort of lead them through the story of the challenges that I've had and sort of overcoming obstacles. But most importantly, from time to time, pause and say how this relates to them. My goal is not to get up there and give my sob story. That could be just on-stage therapy, which is awkward and not helpful. But rather to share it for the point of, from time to time, pausing and saying, maybe you weren't left at the hospital, but let's be honest, there's been times in your life where you felt alone and where you felt abandoned, and here's what you can do about that.
First of all, you mentioned time and taking the students out of class and how the administrators or the principal need to evaluate that decision as to how it needs to be worth it for them. How much time are you taking them out of class for?
Well, it's typically an hour. So typically my speech, these assemblies are, 45 minutes to an hour. So very similar to a keynote presentation in other markets. So it's about that length of time.
And what's the average size of your audience?
I would say the average audience is probably 1,500 students. I mean, I've spoken at things much larger. This summer I keynoted the National FFA convention in Indianapolis, and that was, I believe, 55,000 students.
Wow. From
across the U.S. So I would say in the youth market, the average audience is somewhere between 500 and 2,500 students.
So when you're talking about 500 students, it could be a single high school, even 1,500, but those are fairly large schools, aren't they?
Yeah, sure. And, sometimes schools will join together to bring you in, and they'll bring over one set of students from another high school. Sometimes maybe you do the program back-to-back if the school is really big and the auditorium seats 2,000 and they have 4,000 students. And so, again, and this is where it gets interesting and how I've been able to create such a successful empire in this overlooked market, is that you have a lot of students that you're getting in front of, and you have the opportunity to not only share your message there and collect the paycheck as for the speaking engagement, but also beyond that, books and curriculum and all these other things that schools need and that they have money set aside to pay for.
Let me take a brief pause. We'll be back in just a minute.
Jason offers an inner circle coaching program. This includes 2 30-minute coaching sessions for only $247 a month. For more details, go to jasonhartman.com.
And that's what I was going to ask you, Josh, about your follow-on products, because just doing the math there with the number of engagements you mentioned in your keynote fee, obviously that does not multiply up to $2 million. So,
right.
So what are your follow-ons? I would think you'd have a big opportunity for that in this market. However, it would seem like it would need to be less of the sort of infopreneur, information guru style product, which every speaker is accustomed to, and it needs to be more academic for them to buy it. I mean, are you selling at the back of the room? Are you selling to the schools, or what's the business model there?
Both. Good question. So here's the interesting thing. Number one, when you're working in the youth market, you have an interesting challenge in that who hires you and who you speak to are two different people. So the person that hires me is, like I said, typically in their 40s. The person I speak to is typically a 17-year-old skeptical teenager that doesn't really like speakers. So you have that challenge. But also then the benefit from that is that you have two different groups of individuals that you sell to. So yes, I obviously do the back of the room thing. Now the trick with selling to students is that you have to sell them what they want, not what they actually need. So let me give you an example. What I really want students to do is to take my book and go home and read it, because I know that will help them even more than a 1-hour speech can do, because it's ongoing education. We all get that. But what they're going to buy is some sort of funny inside joke that I put on a T-shirt. So what I do to attempt to kill two birds with one stone, if you will, is that I package the T-shirt and the book together. Because I know if I just offered the book, it's not going to move as well, but the T-shirt, that is something that works specifically in this market. When I spoke at the FFA convention this summer, I sold $75,000 worth of merchandise in a couple hours after my speech. And so, again, this is a place where a lot of people think, well, students aren't going to sign up for my $2,000 infopreneur awesomeness coaching program. Yeah, that's true. So it's more of a numbers game. Now, the other side of it is the schools, the educators. This is where you have the opportunity to have your higher value, higher priced items. So for me, I have a school curriculum where it's a series of DVDs, there's workbooks that the students go through, there's a teacher guide, and these sell from anywhere from $200 to $1,000. And then I also have a couple other ongoing programs that are anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. And this is also a great way for those schools that maybe can't afford to have you in. You can offer them one of these other programs as an alternative.
So you do have back-end programs then, not just products then?
Exactly. So for me, the goal is not to go back to that school next semester or possibly even next year and give another speech, because that's not scalable. My goal here is to get the school, each classroom, to buy a set of the curriculum. Because again, like I said, that's scalable. And the interesting thing is, you look at the book industry, for example. If a mother of a teenager is going to go into a bookstore and buy my book, they're going to buy one. Whereas if a school district buys your book, they buy 5,000. Or if a school district buys your curriculum, they buy 1,000 copies of it and disseminate it into all sorts of different classrooms. So again, you can get really creative with what you're doing, and this is where the opportunity is for more niche topics. It's probably unlikely that I can convince a principal that I want to do a school assembly for 1 hour on a niche topic such as money management. Now, is money management important? Absolutely. Should teenagers be learning about it? Are you kidding me? Absolutely they should. Is it going to be relevant to those 2,000 kids? Are they likely to justify that hour out of class for that? Some, but probably not, because it doesn't necessarily fit leadership motivation prevention. But in these other programs, this is where you can go into your niche topics.
And I'm just curious, Josh, when you mentioned bundling your products, which I thought was a great idea, and the funny T-shirt, it kind of made me think of Abercrombie and Fitch and their funny T-shirts that were controversial and so forth. What is the inside joke on the T-shirt?
Yes, well, it's this insane thing that just says "and a goat," and so it's just basically this silly thing that I made up one day on stage on the spot that I thought was totally going to flop, and kids thought it was hilarious. I basically said, we're going to have this inside joke. Twice a day, end one of your random sentences with the phrase "and a goat." And kids just loved it. They thought it was funny. They liked that it was sort of an inside joke only between us. And so, the T-shirt just says "and a goat" on it. And like I said, I sold $75,000 of them at one gig, so apparently they like it.
Are they cool-looking shirts?
They are totally cool-looking shirts. And that's one of the things in the youth market is it can't just have the phrase on it. It needs to look cool. It needs to be something that they would actually want to wear. And the way that I found out what I should put on my shirt is that I have a Facebook page, obviously, because of my audience, and they're on Facebook all the time. And I kept noticing that kids would leave a comment and say, "Hey, you came to my school today. Your speech was awesome, and a goat. Hey, that was really inspiring. You really helped me think about some things, and a goat." And so they were essentially saying, "Please, for the love of God, would you print and a goat shirts?"
Right. So the audience really asked you for it then.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's always smart in some way or another to find out what your audience wants to buy and then sell it to them as opposed to, well, I hope this is what they want to buy.
Fantastic. So, Josh, what else should the listeners know about speaking to the youth audience?
Yeah, well, there's a few things. Like I said, in the mentorship program that I have with Youth Speaker University, it's interesting because we hold these seminars and students come and they pay good money to come, and it's interesting to see a year later where those aspiring speakers are. They all have been given the same information, the same tools, game plan, blueprint, etc. But what differentiates those that a year later are succeeding and booking high-paid gigs to those that aren't? And I sort of narrowed this down to a few things that I noticed, and one of them is that, and this seems obvious, is that they're not good speakers. They don't focus enough on the craft of speaking. Now, there are lots of marketing tricks and smart marketing techniques that I can teach someone, that your podcast can teach someone, but frankly, if once they buy it, it's not a good product, it's not going to work. I think we've all at some point bought some product, we've seen on television or something that seemed like the world's greatest thing, and then once you get it, maybe it sort of disappointed you. So I don't say that to be discouraging. I say that to say that you must realize that as a speaker, your speech is the product. You are the product. You can buy great marketing, but you have to earn a great speech. So don't ever underestimate that. The best way to get hired is word of mouth, and the only thing that creates word of mouth is once you get there, you just hit a home run. Probably the second thing that I see is that I think aspiring speakers give up too soon. They think that unfortunately, that this is going to happen really quick, or that this should happen overnight, and if I get 99 no's, that means I'm not cut out for this, or that this isn't what I should be doing, which to me I just think is absurd, because as speakers, we stand up on stage and we say things like, don't give up, don't quit, these sorts of things, but then we give up and we quit. And that's something that I see a lot of aspiring speakers do, is that they give up too soon. This is really a game of perseverance. When I first started, I was not that good of a speaker. I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. But year after year, you learn more, you get better, you know your message, you know your niche, and then ultimately you're going to succeed in a fantastic way if you stick to it and you have the right intentions.
Couldn't agree more. Nothing takes the place of persistence. No question about
absolutely.
that. Yeah, fantastic.
And then the third thing, which sort of couples with the first, is that I see a lot of aspiring speakers that are horrible at marketing. They're horrible at marketing. I mean, the truth is that you could have the world's greatest message, and if no one knows about that message, it's helpful to no one. I mean, you could have the world's finest message, the world's most motivating message. It's going to motivate no one because no one's buying it. No one's asking you to stand on stage and give it. I read this quote by Clement Stone. He says, "It's no longer true that you build the best mousetrap and a path will be beaten to your door. Today, the best ideas, services, and products must be sold." And I feel like that applies to us as speakers for sure. I mean, even if you're a great speaker and you have a phenomenal message and the right mindset, If nobody knows about you, you lose.
Of course, absolutely, very good advice. Well, Josh, one more question for you on the sort of logistical and technical details of your business, which, by the way, you've done a fantastic job. Congratulations. Do you have employees? Do you have an office? Are you a home-based sort of solopreneur? I mean, that's the great thing about this business we're in. You really don't need a big staff and a big plant, although some speakers go that route. And I find that they're all very different. What is your business model there?
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, I'll tell you what works for me, and I'm not saying this is what everyone should do. Like you said, each person can sort of do their own thing, but I think there are best practices. So for me, I don't necessarily have employees, but I do have a large team that I work with. And everyone that I work with has a percentage of my business. So meaning handling my speaking business, for example, I am exclusive with a speakers agency. So I give them a percentage of every single speaking gig that they book for me. But because of that, literally all I have to do is get on an airplane, show up, give the speech, go home. That's it. I don't handle contracts. I don't have to talk on the phone. I don't have to sell myself. I don't have to invoice. I don't have to follow up. I don't have to book travel, any of that. What am I good at? I'm good at getting up on that stage and giving that 1 hour speech. Am I good at returning emails and doing invoices? Not so much. That's not my thing. So for me, I would always have rather partnered with an expert, someone who's phenomenal at it, and give them a percentage of my business, rather hire someone, pay them, $60,000 a year or $100,000 a year or whatever, and try to train them to be one of the best, when frankly someone that's been doing it for a long time is going to be the best at it anyway. It's the same reason why people should hire professional speakers, not someone who just sort of likes to talk.
Very good point.
And then, I have other things going on. Television thing, I'm represented by United Talent Agency. They take a percentage and thus handle everything involved there. On the product creation side, I have someone that I partner with, and they take a percentage and handle details and product creation and media creation and such. And so I just look at the different things that I want to get involved in, and then I partner with someone who I think is really good at it and give them a percentage. But I should say none of the other things I'm involved in, television, books, now training other speakers, none of that would be possible without this speaking business, without having first said, I'm going to build a speaking business, and out of that grew credibility to get a book deal. Out of that credibility grew the ability to go out and sell a television show, all of these things. So speaking is an awesome business and gives you an amazing platform you can do a literally unlimited number of things with.
That is fantastic. Well, Josh Shipp, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for your candor and your openness and just really sharing with the listeners. That was really great. Some of my interviews are somewhat guarded about their secrets and so forth, but you were not. You were just very open about it, and that will be forever appreciated by anybody listening and, of course, by me as well. So thank you very much for joining us today. Any just quick tips or advice in closing?
I would say this. I would say that particularly I want to talk to anyone that's listening that is an aspiring speaker. This industry as a speaker is all about inspiring others. But if you're going to do this, the first person you must inspire is yourself. You're probably listening to this podcast because you've been thinking about speaking for a long time. I would encourage you to stop thinking about it and take that first step. I'm not saying you have to quit your job tomorrow. I'm saying, what is that first step that you can take so 3 months later you're 3 steps down the road, and then eventually it's going to be too late to turn back in a good way. So you can do this, but only if you will.
Excellent. Well, Josh, give out your website and tell people where they can learn more.
Sure. So website is joshshipp.com. And then also for anyone interested in entering the youth market, you can just Google Youth Speaker University, and you'll find some great free info that we didn't have time to cover today about how to get started in that industry.
Excellent. Josh Shipp, thank you so much for joining us today, and keep up the good work out there. You're a true inspiration to the industry.
My pleasure, sir. Thanks a lot.
Now's your opportunity to get the Financial Freedom Report. The Financial Freedom Report provides financial self-defense in uncertain times, and it's your source for innovative, forward-thinking investment property strategies and advice. Get your newsletter subscription today. You get a digital download and even more. Go to jasonhartman.com to get yours today. Copyright the Hartman Media Company. For publication rights and interviews, please email media@jasonhartman.com. This show offers very general information. Opinions of guests are their own. Nothing contained herein should be considered personalized, personal, financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. Every investor's strategy and goals are unique. You should consult with a licensed real estate broker or agent or other licensed investment, tax, and/or legal advisor before relying on any information contained herein. Information is not guaranteed. Please call 714-820-4200 and visit www.jasonhartman.com for additional disclaimers, disclosures, and questions.